Hey guys, Jess from Stark Skincare here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. It's really good for my ego. Just kidding. I just, I want to show up here every week and I want you to be here with me. So, good times. I am here today a little bit under the weather, possibly with a slight fever right now, to talk about the recent health journey that I've been on, super ironically considering how I'm feeling right now. So once my cat settles in. So I have become, in the past several years, I guess what you could call an intuitive eater. My cat agrees. I went from, having a far more dogmatic approach to diet as being not just a lifestyle, but a statement, and it being a political statement. And this was literally my jam since I was 10 years old and decided to become a vegetarian. I don't know if you guys can hear my cat. She's talking to me. She wants to be part of the video. So whenever I was 10, I loved animals. I still love animals. And I decided to become vegetarian because my aunt and uncle were vegans. They still are vegan. And so when I was 10 and young and impressionable, being vegan and or vegetarian just seemed like the coolest thing, to be honest. I just thought it was so like punk. I mean, it was the 90s, so the health movement then felt different than it is now. It was way more subversive. It was way more it wasn't so much of an individual thing as it felt like a collective thing, if that makes any sense. And even though I was only 10, I really wanted to be part of that, and I used to wear like the Body Shop like Save the Whales shirts. So I was a vegetarian for a very long time, and it was met by my family with a lot of contempt. And it was very difficult. I always felt like I had to be the activist, like the advocate for all of vegetarianism and veganism from like a very, very young age. It was like every mealtime felt like a battle. Every time going out to a restaurant felt like, I had to make a statement. I did fall into the trap of kind of like lecturing people once in a while, but also I got tired of that very, very quickly because I didn't feel like arguing, every time I was eating. Often whenever you change your diet, for some reason people take it very personally. Oh, she's combing my hair. People take it very personally, and it's like because I'm making a choice, people seem to think that it's, putting down their own choices. It's the same right now with homeschooling. We're homeschooling our child, but often whenever you mention this to other parents, it's met with a lot of resistance, it's met with a lot of hostility, and people just trying to defend their own opinions and or their own, decisions and choices. And what people don't seem to understand is I don't care what you do. I don't. I'm just making my own choices, and if you're interested in information, then I'm happy to share, but otherwise, I just mention things in passing, and that's that. Because I learned from a young age that there's a time and a place for educating people, and it has to be voluntary. So if you're here voluntarily watching my video and you want to hear about what I'm talking about, that's cool, but I'm done with forcing information on people, and I've been done with that for a very long time. So yeah, so I was vegetarian and vegan for a very, very long time, until I was a teenager and became what I now call a social flexitarian, which just meant that I had no fight left in me, and whenever I was in social settings, and if the main dish that was prepared for us for dinner contained meat, I would eat it. Unless it was like a steak, I wouldn't have like a slab of meat. I'd eat everything else, but let's say it was chicken pot pie, I would eat the chicken pot pie. So I ate like that for a very long time. I was living on my own when I was 17 and I never bought meat. So I didn't identify with necessarily being vegetarian or vegan, but that's how I ate 97% of the time, but without making like a big deal about it. Into my 20s, same deal. Once in a while I would eat meat. Mostly I did not, and I just didn't identify with any particular label. And this was pretty much the case like right up into my later 20s, where I would sort of flip-flop between being vegan at home, often vegetarian when I went out, but then whenever we would travel, I just went back to being flexitarian just because of some really annoying situations that reminded me of sort of my childhood and having to like defend myself and having to like have these like political arguments with people at dinner parties about eating meat or not eating meat, and just the whole ridiculousness of it. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. So whenever I would travel, I became a flexitarian. But you know, I wouldn't purchase meat, and I'm not saying that this is a perfect solution, and I know that the vegans and vegetarians can be very upset about this, and I get it because I've been there for such a long time. Oh, and by the way, so my company is vegan and it always will be. So it doesn't matter what I'm eating like on the side, my company is vegan always. So yeah, so I sort of ate this like loose vegan-ish diet for a very long time. My diet was very heavy in grains, legumes, fruits and vegetables, and I have a thing for yogurt. So like, and yogurt. Until I got pregnant and I started really craving meat, and I felt so guilty about it. And then, you know, my husband's joke, because he's Argentinian, he's like, well, you've got a little Argentinian growing in you, and, you know, he wants his carnes, so it's not a big deal. Like, he wants his beef. Even though my husband's basically vegan, but the joke is that, you know, Argentinians love beef. My father-in-law, by the way, owns a restaurant, and it's like an Argentinian asado, so like a grill, and so it's a very beef-centric culture or like family that he comes from. So yeah, and I was craving the meat before I even knew that I was pregnant. So to me, I mean, I decided that I was going to eat meat, and that it was just my body's way of telling me what I needed. For the past few years, since becoming a mom, my hormones have changed often and dramatically. So, you know, if you've had children, you know what it does to your body, just in terms of the onslaught of hormones that you get. I gained a lot of weight during my pregnancy. I gained 70 pounds. I lost it quickly because I breastfed like a mofo. We are attachment parents. Don't get mad at me about that either. And so I breastfed on demand, and co-slept with my son. So I was the all-night buffet. And I started running at that time as well, and I shed so much weight. I went under my starting weight, so I was about 35 pounds less than I am now. I got very, very thin, and like to the point where, like, you know, for a while I was like, woohoo, like I'm losing all this weight and it's not all that hard. I'm not really changing, I can eat whatever I want. I'm just breastfeeding, and then I just go for like a run like 3 times a week, and I was like so fit, like my arms looked awesome, like, but then I started getting really skinny, like to the point where I felt gaunt, and I felt like the breastfeeding and everything was like sucking the life out of me. It was very dramatic, and I decided after 2.5 years that I was gonna stop breastfeeding, and weaned very quickly. So I'm mentioning all that because just my hormones went through a crazy roller coaster. I don't think I did the weaning properly, and so I just kind of tanked after that, and it was very hard. And at that same time, we left Montreal to go on a very long trip, and the stress and just like not having that oxytocin anymore, it was just like a roller coaster. And during my travels, and then since we've moved here, I've gained like 35 pounds. So the past couple years have been a little bit difficult because I am dealing with sort of a new body again. But it's not so much that as it's just been my energy levels. And so for a while, my husband has been asking me about the ketogenic diet, like would I want to do this with him? Because we suspected years and years and years ago that my husband might have been pre-diabetic, just because of the way he's eaten sugar his whole life. He had no nutritional knowledge really when I met him and didn't know how bad sugar was, and he thought, you know, a calorie is a calorie, and he's like super tall and slender, and so it was like, well, it's not making him obese, so how can it be bad? I mean, I guess he's an extremely bright person, just never really thought about food, at least not as much as me. Whenever his blood sugar would fall, he would start shaking. And so after like a couple years of this and just being like, what the hell, he had found the ketogenic diet. He put the link between, like, you know, carbs being the same thing basically as sugar. And so he just started really controlling like his glucose levels that way, and he noticed such a big difference for him. Now, he wasn't ketogenic, but he was being more mindful of his carb intake. I was not. I would eat very healthy food all the time. You know, it was like quinoa and chickpeas and fruits and veggies, and these are all healthy, really great foods, but they're extremely, extremely rich in carbs, which can be perfectly fine for most people. But, you know, I wasn't feeling good for a while, and so after, you know, my husband begging me to just try the ketogenic diet, I was like, no, 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 no. Finally, my husband came home with this book, or rather it was sent to us. So it's called The Keto Diet, and it's by Leanne Vogel, and she is a Canadian nutritionist. She actually went to the same nutrition school as my cousin, which is here in Ottawa, and she's awesome. She's just such a badass chick, and she talks all about her own eating disorders and her, you know, obsession with like weightlifting and doing this kind of diet and that kind of diet. Like, she's been through the whole rigmarole. And by the way, she has a great YouTube channel, look it up, and her book is awesome. And it's just so well organized, like all kind of, like, it's recipes in the back, but then the whole first part just like describes and explains the ketogenic diet and about fasting and what it means to go into ketosis, and the pros and cons, different types of keto diets that you might want to follow for different reasons. It's very cool. It's a very cool book. And as I started leafing through it, a light bulb went off, and I just thought, I have to try this. I have to try this. There was, you know, I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Hopefully losing pounds, not gaining pounds, but also gaining energy. And within 3-4 days, I got my body into ketosis. So ketosis is when your body switches from using glucose as its fuel to using fat as fuel. Fat for fuel. Dr. Mercola is one of the big advocates of the ketogenic diet. So anyways, so we tried it out. Within just a few days, my body switched into going into fat burning. I felt really, really good. There's a lot with this diet, so if you are interested in it, you have to do your research, because there's all kinds of ways of messing it up, to be honest. So I do a plant-centric version of keto, and I do keto cycling, meaning that every once in a while I do a carb up. Now, I've only done it once now in the past 7 weeks, and I didn't do it very well, but this is my plan going forward. It's like whenever I feel a little bit deprived and drained, and, you know, when I have PMS, I'm gonna do like a healthy carb up just to keep everything balanced, and like sort of shock my body a little bit too, so that it like keep myself on my toes, so to speak. That's definitely not a scientific explanation for why I'm trying to do the cyclical ketosis, but I have noticed such a difference in myself. And you know, experimenting with your diet is one of the best things I think you can do. You know, if you have acne, doing an elimination diet is so useful. Cutting out dairy and cutting out gluten are two awesome things to try. Do one and then do the other and see what works best for you. Try to cut things out for at least 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, longer if you can, because, you know, cutting something out for 2 days not gonna tell you shit. So you do need to do things for, you know, a longer period of time. But for me, this has been just a really big eye-opener, that the way that I was eating was not working. And intuitively, I know that for me right now, this is the best thing for my body. And you know, maybe in 6 months it won't be, but I feel like knowing that I can do this eating style is like a really great tool to have in my back pocket. My brain went online. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like all of a sudden everything was just so clear. I had so much energy. So lately, I'm speaking about in the past because lately I haven't been feeling super great. So, you know, I'm trying to go with my intuition and moving towards, you know, figuring out some other things that might be working for me. Like maybe I'm consuming too many of my bulletproof coffees. I don't think so, because I'm only having one a day. I'm gonna not be exercising enough. You know, I have to keep rolling with the punches and keep adapting, which I think is really important when it comes to everything in your life. You know, if it's diet, if it's relationships, if it's your skincare, being adaptive is just such an important theme in my life and like what I want to teach to people. So I'm very happy that I sort of took the risk to try this new way of eating. You know, I feel like I can always have the spirit of a vegan without always eating that way. And I know that that's very controversial, but I have to do what's best for my own body. And the amount of grains and legumes and fruit and stuff that I was eating before, and gummy bears and wine, just wasn't doing me any favors. And you know, I felt awful. So I've already lost about 5 or 6 pounds. I'm not bloated, so like the shape of my body has changed, which is really awesome. I could stay at this weight. I don't even care about weight, but I'm just happy that, like, you know, like my tummy is like smaller now. Like I'm more like hourglass and less like an apple, you know, but I still feel curvy, and like my pants fit very comfortably, and you know, so I feel really good physically, lots of energy. Like I said, my brain just feels really clear. I've been very creative, super productive. It's been a total game changer for me. So, you know, it's always worth looking at, you know, what you eat, how you live. Even if you think you're doing all the right things, if it doesn't feel right, it's time to reevaluate. So